Good evening, everyone. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask that all present silence their cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw forbids the use of mobile devices during council and council planning meetings. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. by formally recognizing that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We respectfully acknowledge our responsibility to work toward right relations with our Indigenous partners and thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this place, pardon me, for thousands of years. In particular, we acknowledge the proud heritage of our neighbors from the Alderville First Nation and the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that Council approve the March 18th, 2024 Council Planning Meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting. Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds statutory public meeting on the planning application and then receives a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. After council has made our decision, any person or public body may appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as long as they have made an oral submission at this meeting or provided comments in writing to the clerk's office and requested notice of the decision from the clerk's office. This is also true of any person or public body that wishes to participate in the appeal. For details or information on appealing decisions of council, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wright, that council move into the statutory public meeting March 18th, 2024 at 6:32 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The only item in tonight's statutory public meeting is an application from Lee Mitchell. It's a consent and rezoning application. It is files B01 2024, B02 2024, and Z01 2024, located at 222 Smith Street and 230 Smith Street. The purpose of the public meeting is to request a decision from council on the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment to the Municipality of Brighton Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 140/2002 as amended. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment applications given?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by first-class mail on February 23rd, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a sign notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Would you please also explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment?
The purpose of consent application B01 2024 is to sever a 3.23 acre portion of the property located at 222 Smith Street and add it to the adjacent rural property located at 230 Smith Street. The lot addition application serves to add the environmental features back to the main property at 230 Smith Street. This will result in the retained parcel having a total lot area of approximately 1.48 acres with existing frontage of 69 meters on Smith Street. The retained parcel is intended for a future rural residential dwelling. The purpose of consent application B02 2024 is to facilitate a technical consent cancellation application. The lot to be severed as part of the application B01 2024, located at 222 Smith Street, was previously severed in 2016, and a consent stamp is applied to the parcel. A consent cancellation will be required to cancel the previous consent to allow the lot addition application to continue. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application Z01 2024 will ensure that there is consistent zoning amongst the properties after the lot addition is applied. In addition, the zoning bylaw amendment application will rezone the retained property at 222 Smith Street from the rural exception number 6 zone to a rural residential exception number 56 zone in order to accommodate the proposed lot fabric as a rural residential lot and to permit the existing barn and uses on the property.
Thank you again, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent and or zoning bylaw amendment? There are none noted. Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed consents or zoning bylaw amendment from members of council? Again, none noted. Mrs. Deck, do you have any final comments?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision at this time on the consents and zoning bylaw amendment? Yes. The motion is moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council received the staff report dated March 18th, 2022 regarding 222 and 230 Smith Street consent application files, file numbers B01 2024, B02 2024, and zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z01 2024. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to rezone the severed portion of the lands to be added to 230 Smith Street from rural exception number 6 zone with flood-prone area zone overlay to the rural zone with flood-prone area zone overlay, and to rezone the retained lands at 222 Smith Street, rural exception number 6 zone to a rural residential exception number 56 zone. And further, that council grant provisional consent to application B01 2024, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z01 2024 is finally approved. At the applicant's cost, sufficient land be conveyed by registered transfer to the Municipality of Brighton along the frontage for widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 13 meters from the center line along Smith Street and 10 meters from the center line along Bond Road, inclusive of any associated traveled areas, shoulders, or drainage works. At the applicant's cost, sufficient unencumbered land be conveyed by registered transfer to the Municipality of Brighton to establish a visibility triangle of 22 meters along Smith Street by 11 meters along Bond Road from the existing corner property bar. The conveyances referenced in condition number 3C and 3D above shall be clear of any liens or encumbrances, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. Confirmation from the applicant's solicitor that the severed and benefiting lands will merge on title. The solicitor for the applicant shall submit an undertaking to the municipality to the following effect. I hereby personally undertake to prepare and register an application to consolidate parcels for those lands being the severed lands herein and those lands being the benefiting lands herein, and provide to the municipality the registered application to consolidate parcels as soon as possible after the registration of the severance transfer and designation of the new PIN to the severed lands. That subsection 3 and 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That a consent cancellation certificate under consent application B02 2024 be issued and registered for the subject lands. All taxes on each of the lots to be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The OLS indicate in writing to the Department of Planning and Development that no encroachments of driveways, wells, or septic systems will result from the lot addition conveyances. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained land submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Just a little clarification, the consent cancellation certificate, that's not something we hear of too often. Could I just have an explanation on that, please?
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor. It is a little bit new. It's actually a change from Bill 23 that essentially allowed us to cancel previous consents. And Paul can correct me if I'm wrong in some of the terminology because this is my first time doing this. And I think probably most of our first time doing this. So essentially that, because that new lot was previously severed, there's this stamp on the lot. And once a lot, always a lot. Previously, we would have to break up a lot to add to it. So with Bill 23, they essentially came out with legislation under the Planning Act that allows us to have this technical consent application to just cancel that previous consent stamp on the property. So it is another application because there are some legal items that have to essentially cancel that previous consent to allow these lots to now merge. I hope that answered your question as best as my ability, because this is still fairly new to us as
No,
well.
Thank you for that, Ms. Deck. It's just, like I said, it's not something that I've read before, so it's just looking for a better explanation. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that's the only item in our statutory public meeting. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council move out of the statutory public meeting, March 18th, 2024 at 6:41 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And Mitchell's, you're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. That brings us to planning and development reports. The first report is with regard to short-term accommodations. Mr. McGee, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir? Alan, you can't, it sounds like you're coming in from Disney World, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Very well. Perfect.
Okay, not at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council receives a staff report dated March 18th, 2024 regarding the status of short-term accommodation licensing program for information purposes. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm a little bit surprised at the low number of the STAs. Is this really accurate? I was thinking that there would be way more than 14 whole homes and 14 shared accommodations.
Mr. McGee?
Through your worship. Yeah, that's what we have for licensed STAs in the municipality. I mean, if you go on Airbnb and VRBO, the ones that show are actually the ones that are licensed. We have, I mean, along with Granicus, the company we're using to help discover and manage short-term accommodations, we're coming out with the same numbers of STAs. Yeah, that is the accurate number.
And so 61 number of enforcement letters sent are to those 28. Like, that's a lot of enforcement notices.
Mr. McGee?
Through your worship, I'm finding that, once people find out they need a license and they receive the application, they are no longer operating. I had one today. They received a letter. Well, today was sent out at the end of last week, and they've taken their listing off Airbnb.ca. So when the majority of the letters that are sent out, they stop operating as an STA.
Got it. Thank you.
And for a long-term accommodation perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the community. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. I note in there that some penalties have been assessed. Have we collected some of those penalties? And if so, how much? And if not, how are we addressing them? So my first question.
Mr. McGee?
I would have to speak to finance if we're collecting them. The way the Municipal Act reads with penalty notices, that there's 15 days that they have to pay them, and then if they don't, then those penalties can be put on their property taxes. So I think that's how we're going to end up collecting them is once they're on the property taxes, they have to pay their property tax.
Director Walsh, could we get a report on that, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'll get a follow-up report to council.
Appreciate that. Councillor Wilden?
Thank you. I didn't notice anything in here, and maybe it's not the right department, but do we have an update on collection of mat taxes from these?
Who wants to field that one? Director?
The MAT tax is, it applies to short-term accommodations for sure. In addition, it applies to motels and other roof tourist accommodations. So we've are looking at collecting all the MAT taxes through the finance office. And so we can, in that follow-up report, I can maybe coordinate with the finance department to see what the final plan there is for the collection of MAT. We expect to collaborate also with the Bay of Quinte Tourism Board. According to legislation, we have to share 50% of the collection with a tourism marketing board. So that's our chosen board. So they will be doing a lot of the collection for us. So I can report back on how things are proceeding with the marketing board as well.
Thank you both. Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair, just a comment or observation. Both Granicus and Mari on their websites talk about STA operators going dark. They call them ghosting. When they're first sent a notice to license, they do that. They pull down their ads. They ghost or go dark for 3 or 4 weeks. So that doesn't mean they've disappeared. It's just a way of circumventing regulation. Some of them will go from Airbnb to Vrbo or to bookings.com or to Facebook. So they'll pop up somewhere else. That doesn't mean that they've disappeared as an operator. So I guess the lesson I learned from there is Granicus and Hamari, because of their bots and so many sites that they scour, should be able to keep track of those when they reappear. Just a observation for you.
Thank you. Good information. I guess for us to keep tabs on what's happening out there. Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to Mr. Walsh regarding the MAT tax. So you said, if I understand it, is Granicus collecting the MAT tax, or is Bay of Quinte Marketing collecting the MAT tax? And how are we going to find that out?
Director Walsh?
My intent is to dialogue with the Director of Finance Administration. I think the current plan is to do some billings on a quarterly basis for collection. I think that was the one option that was being mostly touted. So I'll just confirm that through the director. But it'd be the municipality that does the collection and then shared with the Bay of Quinte Marketing Board. The Bay of Quinte Marketing Board will also have access to Granicus in helping with some of the processing of those notifications.
And it's my understanding that organizations like Vrbo and Airbnb collect the tax and submit it to the municipality.
That's correct. If we had an agreement with them.
Okay,
But that doesn't help us collect from all the other
correct.
platforms. So I think in some of the bigger centers, you can get some wholesale collection that way, and you've got 80% of the job done. But as Councillor Faridas pointed out, Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, there's a lot of niche. There's Expedia is what I'm told is a lot of, for whatever reason, is the venue of choice for a lot of the advertisements for STAs in Brighton, for example.
Intriguing. Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair to Director Walsh, I was delighted to hear you talk about quarterly collection of MAT tax. But I wonder if that requires us to amend our bylaw, because our bylaw says 6 months. It doesn't say from what date, but it says 6 months, which always seemed a little unusual to me, because every other municipality has quarterly filings for MAT tax. And our 6 months doesn't have a peg date that it starts from. It could be 6 months from whenever. And one of the concerns has always been, if you allow them to run a whole season and then give them 6 months, are they talking June of the following year? And when they file, will they file on the basis of their off-season rates or their prime season rate? All the more reason, I think, to stipulate that it's a quarterly filing and maybe we need to revisit our bylaw.
Director Walsh.
Through the mayor and council, I'll confer with the director of finance and administration just to confirm what the program is. It may have been semi-annual. I may have misspoke on the quarterly basis, but I think you raise a point that will be a subject for staff conversation.
Thank you both. Anything further from members of council? Councilor Rowley.
Yeah, so not everything is Airbnb. Some are just bed and breakfast. Some are just cottages that are rented out. Do we collect from that, and how do we get that? Does that go through Granicus as well, or does that go through Bay of Quinte, or all of those kind of off the Airbnb stuff collected as well? How do we keep track of that?
Director Walsh.
Sure. The licensing bylaw permits a maximum of 2 weeks rental without needing a license. So if somebody's renting their cottage for longer than that, then they will need a license. Yeah, and we don't have a licensing framework that allows them to get a prorated license. So if they only want to license it for 3 weeks, that they get some kind of shortened period of license, therefore shortened level of fees. No, it's either you rent for only 2 weeks or get a license.
Thank you both. Anything further? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next report is with regard to Brighton Applefest, no pets permitted. Mr. McGee, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Not at this time.
Thank you. The motion before me is moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council receives the staff report dated March 18th, 2024 regarding Applefest Committee not permitting dogs, pets at Applefest for information purposes. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. There seems to be a lot of stuff here that I'm not sure that we need to be dealing with. I'm really concerned about the 50 to 100 signs. That seems a little excessive, Alan. I think as far as the Applefest committee goes, and maybe we will take this to our committee, we meet this week to kind of review this report before we get a solid bylaw in place. Fencing and those kind of things that you mentioned here in the different locations. I thought the municipality already had a no dogs or no pets bylaw regarding municipal property, and we were hoping that this bylaw put in place was for a 1 day only, basically on Main Street. Can you explain why it has to be all more encompassing? This seems quite excessive as far as looking after this.
Mr.
I
McGee.
have a couple more questions, but we'll start with that.
Mr. McGee.
Through your worship. Yeah, the signage, I mean, just like parking, if you don't have the signage, the enforcement can be challenged because they're going to claim they didn't know. Fencing, I mean, I believe the street dance, we had an area, it might have been the eating area, fenced around, and no dogs were allowed inside there. I put roughly 50 to 100 signs, but I was not 100% sure of the layout of Applefest. The car shows at, the Brighton Public School, that is a fenced-in area, which, we would only need a sign basically at the entrance and exit. So just a couple signs. As for municipal property, dogs have to be leashed. They're still permitted at the parks. They just have to be leashed. They can't be off leash unless it's the Bark Park, which is an off leash park.
So the intent here is not necessarily a massive enforcement effort. The intent here is to be able to have someone go up to a dog owner or a pet owner on the street and say, it's illegal to do this, and there's the sign over there 100 feet away or 20 feet away. And if you don't remove yourself from the main street, you'll be fined, and then people go away. That's the intent. I don't think we need to be, my opinion is we don't need to be onerous about this. for a one-day celebration in the community. We just want to keep people and frankly, their dogs safe. The reality is people are bringing dogs into an environment where dogs should not be. They are clearly uncomfortable when you see them walking down the street. By and large, some of them are just very friendly and dumb, but those are the best dogs. But unfortunately, some of the human owners are not friendly and also dumb, and are the ones bringing their pets to the main street during Applefest. And those are the folks we want to go after. This isn't about a crippling enforcement effort or about fining people necessarily. It's about having a bylaw so that the OPP officer who's walking down Main Street, who was giving people trouble last year in Applefest because clearly the pamphlet said no dogs, has a bit of something in their back pocket that they can then say, and I can charge you if you don't remove your dog from the street. And I just think there's a balance between what we've got here, and I appreciate what you've done, Alan. You're trying to be thorough, and I understand that, but there's a balance between what we've got here and what the effort is intended to be, which is simply to keep people safe at the end of the day. Councillor Rowley, you have a question.
Thank you. Well said, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We don't want to come off as a community that don't appreciate people and their pets. That's for sure. The sign as well, we would like it to then maybe say no pets allowed, not necessarily dogs. We've had other pets that are a little bit kind of, snakes and other things that I don't want to see a snake on Main Street on any day. So wondering if we could kind of adjust that a little bit as well and maybe have the bylaw number written right on the sign as well. So people know that we do have a bylaw and that those who are out with security or the OPP can have something, as you say, to back up to kind of enforce that. And as I say, again, I don't really think we need that many signs as long as we have it there and we have a bylaw that we can put it on our social media and on our pamphlets and on our signs. So people see that even before they get here.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Anything further from members of council? Go ahead.
One more thing. I'm wondering, the chair of our Applefest committee is here. Is this something that we should take to our meeting on Wednesday, Laura, just to have the committee review it?
No, you're not, as you know.
Can you nod your head?
The reality is the chair of the Applefest committee could have that brought up, have the agenda amended if this was a discussion point at your Applefest committee. It doesn't require a conversation this evening.
All right, then. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. I would recommend that we refer this back to staff rather than receiving it as information purposes so that it comes back as a report to us. Councillor Wheeldon as the mover, are you okay with that? Yeah, and Councillor Wright as the seconder. I've scratched out for information purposes and I've written and refers the report to staff for updates. Is that okay with you, Councillor Wheeldon? Councillor Wright? Anything further for members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is with regard to automated speed enforcement program implementation. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Mayor to council, just like to point out that there's a little change in recommendation number 5, where you see the number 60 days. It should be 90 days to be consistent with the MTO agreement that specifies 90 days.
Thank you, sir. Motion is moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council receives a staff report regarding agreements associated with the automatic speed enforcement system dated March 18th, 2024, and that council authorized the clerk and mayor to sign necessary agreements for the implementation of an automated speed enforcement program, including an agreement to purchase 2 automated speed enforcement cameras from from Traffic Logics and related back-end ticketing processing services from Dacra Tech Canada Inc., all within the approval of the capital and operating budgets and as reviewed for acceptance by the municipal solicitor. And that council authorized the procurement of automated speed enforcement cameras and Dacra Tech Inc. data process servicing as a single source purchase. And that the initial street segment to be made subject to an automated speed enforcement program be located within the designated school zone along Elizabeth Street, and that appropriate signage be installed imminently, including for the purpose of giving public notice of the pending program. And that for the purposes of public notice, an automated speed enforcement program does not commence until after 90 days after the signs have been posted. And further, that council approve that any net surplus from the automated speed enforcement program be transferred to the contingency reserve fund. Councillor Rowley and Councillor Fredis, I have stricken out the number 60 and written in the number 90. Is that okay with you both? Okay. Any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Director Walsh, I just want to say thank you for bringing this forward. It will do wonders to restore safety in our community, particularly on Elizabeth, where we have all those kids at lunchtime going up and down the road to the restaurant. My research says in other municipalities that have put this in, the minute those signs go up, there seems to be a behavioral change, happens almost instantly. It's not long lasting, but at least for a near term, there is a behavioral change and people start to slow down. And around about the 40th, 45th day, their memories blank out and they go back to old habits. But again, thank you for bringing this forward.
Director?
I just want to acknowledge Mr. Al McGee did a lot of work on research for this report.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. McGee, for your assistance getting us here. It's appreciated. I know this is an important program that's been initiated by members of council, and particularly I'd point out Councillor Fredis and his work to get us here as well. So thank you all for your efforts. Is there anything further on the motion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think during budget time or whatever, and I'm just looking, I was kind of a little bit mixed up with the numbers. At one point, we talked about support of 120,000, and then somewhere in here I read 170,000. Can I just have a little bit better explanation on the math on that, please?
Director?
Through the Mayor to Council, so the $120,000 is a correct recall by you. That was for capital. But then we also allocated about 50,000 of the operating budget for a total of 170. And then the revenue side is a reflection of that. So out of the revenues collected through the ASC program, it's to cover that 170. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm assuming as far as when you say operating, we're looking at staffing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to items for information purposes. The first is the secondary plan update. Mrs. Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, nothing at this stage.
Thank you very much. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receives this update report regarding the secondary plan project in Brighton for information purposes. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. So another update. Thank you very much. When do we expect to have this totally completed?
Mrs. Whiteman.
Thank you. We're looking towards late summer this year, 2024.
Late summer of this year? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is the official plan amendment number 15, revised Parks and Recreation Policy, Northumberland County's notice of decision. A motion moved by by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council receive for information the Northumberland County notice of decision for the revised Parks and Recreation policies. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next is new generic regulations for conservation authorities of Ontario. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wright, that council receive for information the new generic regulations for conservation authorities of Ontario. Is there any discussion? I just really like the title. The new generic regulations. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion's carried. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first is zoning bylaw amendment Z01 2024, moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140, 2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 222 Smith Street and 230 Smith Street, legally described as part of Lot 31, Concession A, being Part 1 on Registered Plan 39R, 7273, except Parts 1 and 2 on Registered Plan 39R, 9783, and Part 1 on 39R 13403, and part of Lot 31, Concession A, being Part 1 on Registered Plan 39R 13403. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Now it's time for question period. Is there anyone in the gallery who has a question with anything that was on tonight's agenda? None noted, and I don't see anyone online for that purpose. So, would you rather I take a recess before we go into close or after? After? So if council chooses to proceed into closed session, we will take a recess after the closed session for a period of 10 minutes. I will also remind everyone that the live YouTube stream will end when we go into the closed session, and we will not return to the live YouTube stream when we come out of the closed session back into open session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council resolve itself into closed session March 18th, 2024 at 7:08 p.m. pursuant to the Ontario Municipal Act, RSO 2001 as amended, subsection 239(2)(c), a proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality or local board, potential purchase of land. That should read a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. Okay. And I've made that correction, Councillor Fredis and Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We are recessed for 10 minutes.